Hey friends, Audrey Henley here, and today I'm going to be talking about 4 annoying writer traits. It's a listicle, but it's only 4 this time because they're 4 big ones. This is partially a response to some things that have been happening in the writing community, but also just some things that I notice as someone who also works in publishing. I notice a lot of things that writers do that publishers find annoying, so I'm going to be covering some of those, some insider info on that, so stay tuned. Okay, writer trait number 1. This is not caring about reader experience, and I have several subpoints to this. Overall, this is just a failure to consider audience. A lot of writers, especially starting out, they really see writing as a getaway, as a fun thing to do, as building your own world and your own story, and of course it is all of those things, but I think writers who fail to consider their readers at all are doing themselves a disservice when they're trying to get their work published. Here's why. If you want your book to be published, it means you want people to read it. And you want people to spend their money on this story and on your book. So if you don't consider your readers at all, it's sort of like putting a product out there because it's fun and not like doing any testing on it, not doing any like market research. This is sort of a symptom of art for art's sake. Art should just be something that's fun and that we enjoy. But at the end of the day, books kind of straddle the line between art and a product. I really think you need to keep both in mind. Of course, don't write things that aren't exciting to you, but you know, make some tweaks to help make your book accessible to a broad audience. Like I said, this is a symptom of art for art's sake sort of mentality and like that, and writers thinking we're artists, which we are to a certain extent. But there are some more insidious things that this has to do with. So one is a lack of authentic voice, and you see this a lot in YA. And the reason is YA is a very new category in publishing, and it's sort of been a cash cow for a while. It's drying up as the market saturates, but that has been the norm for like 20 years. And so because of the big boost in sales in YA, there are a lot of writers who wouldn't traditionally, be geared to write toward a teen audience who are writing it. And this sort of gets into the new adult argument and how there should be books for new adults. But what this general trend has resulted in is a lot of books being shelved in YA or teen and not actually being written for a teen audience. There are a lot of writers who had like a 20-year-old protagonist and then they were told by an editor or whoever to age them down. So of course this is sort of like a more general industry problem rather than like completely on writers, but I'm still including it. Writers are trying to write toward potentially more profitable audiences that they didn't really intend the book to be written for in the first place. And this can result in a lot of bad things, like inauthentic voice. So I have this protagonist in my book who is a teen but likes some kinds of coffee, which has always actually been a pet peeve of mine when teens are just drinking away at their coffee. That's kind of a writer thing to love coffee, but that doesn't mean your teenage protagonist has to. I actually thought it was a good move for my protagonist because she was emancipated at an early age and was an actor, and so she was kind of thrust into adulthood way before she should have been. So that's kind of a weird aside. But anyway, so trying to make these 20-year-old protagonists into teens and not really doing the work of making sure that voice is authentic and following through. Maybe your teen's favorite drink should be Mountain Dew. I don't know. Maybe try to be a little more realistic and authentic to teen voice. Another, sort of semi-related thing is writer Twitter. We'll have a lot of adults writing YA, saying things on Twitter that they probably don't mean for teens to see, but that teens are going to see. And it's just sort of not taking teens into consideration at all when you're writing for the audience. It's a little ridiculous to me. And then the most insidious thing about this point, which I'll remind you because I've been rambling for a while, is that annoying thing about writers is not caring about reader experience. And this is having to do with diversity and inclusion. The fact is that the reading audience in the United States is not 100% white. And it's not 100% straight. And it's not 100% Christian, There are all sorts of people reading books in the United States. We're not going to have a white majority in the United States for very long. The world is just globalizing altogether. It doesn't matter where you live. Like the English world in particular, the English speaking world is diversifying, and so we need to write books that acknowledge that experience. And kind of going back to the other point about people who are more suited to writing adult writing YA, there's also people who are throwing in token characters and trying to stretch and maybe write things and call them own voices when they're maybe not own voices. It definitely happens. Oh, it's hard because you need to definitely include, you know, characters with different life experiences, but you also don't want to include them and have harmful stereotypes or oversimplifications, or just change a James to a Javier because you're trying to include more diversity in your book. It's better if you think about diversity in the plotting process, in the planning process, and having sensitivity readers, and just having a lot of readers in general, so you get a lot of opinions about, you know, is my book problematic, whatnot. Again, I do say this is an annoying thing about writers, but every part of the process needs to keep this in mind. The agents should be keeping this in mind, and, you know, publishing should just be more diverse in general, so we have people who are actually acquiring books from a genuine place, right? I thought this point, you know, when I initially wrote it, it was more about writers who don't really take this stuff into consideration, which is definitely a thing. There are definitely writers who just have a 100% white cast in their book and don't even think about it. Or they have a 100% middle class book and they don't even think about it. This is something I grew up struggling with as someone who grew up in a working class background. I really gravitated toward things in working class backgrounds, so like Malcolm in the Middle was one of my favorite shows because they were characters going through things that I had gone through. I think that was something I was missing a lot in literature. It's just good to have different perspectives out there and different kinds of books. Yes, writers need to consider this, and yes, writers need to care about reader experience and think about who, you know, is actually reading their books, but also they need to be careful when they do it. One final point on this is alienating vocabulary. So this is sort of related to the earlier point about having like teens drinking coffee and stuff. You could also be having teens saying words that no teen uses, and it's alienating, and you really do have to write for your audience. It's not dumbing anything down, it's being smart about how you're writing. So, annoying writer trait number 2. This one is near and dear to my heart, and at probably every writer's heart, but this is expecting instant recognition for writing. Expecting you can write something and then everyone's gonna love it. You want to get published. You write things quietly, you trade with strangers on the internet and get feedback, and you query, and you get rejected, and it's just a whole lot of not instant gratification. Like, books can take forever to write. For me, they take at least 6 months to write, and more time to revise, and more time to revise after you thought you were done revising, and so many months of worrying and querying and then giving up because this is just me, giving up because you wrote in the wrong genre essentially, and you have to shove that book and get back up and write a new one, right? I guess it's just sort of a mindset that we have as a society right now about instant gratification. There's no instant gratification with books. It's not with reading. Books take days to read for most people. It's not with, querying. You're not going to just get all happy, nice things. You're going to get rejections. And even with critique partners, you're going to get critical feedback, which is, the whole point of critique partners. And so if you're going into writing expecting just everyone loving your words, like, it's not the point. At least if you're trying to get published, self-published or traditionally published, if you're trying to essentially sell a lot of books to the public, you need to know that you're not going to get instant gratification. You can't write something, print it, and call it good, because it's not going to be good, I promise you. Every single person who you look up to and you think of as a good writer, I promise you they've struggled and they've worked on their craft. And it might not be the way that you struggle and work on your craft. Just know that everyone has to go through several drafts and several rounds of editing, at least until they make it big. I just encourage you to really expect that, and to sort of, instead of the gratification being the thing that makes you excited about writing, it should really be the process of learning getting better at a skill, and honestly like getting really good at a skill that not many people are good at. I've been seeing a lot of videos about this lately, but a lot of people want to be writers, a lot of people say they write sometimes, but not a lot of people write an entire book. If you've written an entire book, you are a special brand of human and a rare, you know, percent of the population. And then if you revise your book, whew, you're even rarer. And then if you know, proceed to keep revising and pursuing publishing, you're gonna make it. You are doing the right things. But just know, instant gratification, not part of the workflow. It's not in the equation ever at any point in the process. So, annoying writer trait number 3. This is writers who like to berate and belittle people in the traditional publishing world. And this goes for self-published authors, but I'm actually mostly talking about traditional authors here. Let's be real. Let me just tell you about a classic, Terry Goodkind, the adult science fiction writer. He wrote a Facebook post making fun of his cover. He didn't look into who his cover designer was. He never bothered to read the back cover copy and see who it was and talk to him directly and say, you know, can we maybe talk about this design a little bit? There was none of this professionalism. He just took the cover from his publisher, posted it, made fun of it on Facebook, and the cover designer found out about this, replied to the message and was like, been nice working with you, Terry, but I'm done working on your covers, you know, as he should have, because dear God, that's so rude. Terry Goodkind responded and said, I don't know who you are. And it's fair, you know, publishing is a very opaque industry, but Terry Goodkind has published so many books and he never once bothered to figure out who his cover designer was and to thank him. Yikes. And then he proceeded to make fun of him on the internet. There's really this lack of appreciating all the people who work on your book. And let me just say, at my publishing house, who works with the books, you know, that come through are very small and mostly nonfiction press. Who touches the book and makes it better? There is the acquiring editor. There's the editorial assistant who actually probably read the manuscript first and was like, this is good, or this isn't. There's the marketing director who decided whether or not that book would be profitable. There's publicity who, you know, reaches out to review outlets and makes sure your book gets seen and does all that. There's probably another marketing assistant in there doing stuff like researching contacts, researching bloggers, doing all that. There's the production coordinator who sees the book through all of the production processes. There's me, a production assistant who does things like editing indexes. There is a freelance cover designer. There's a freelance copy editor. There's a freelance proofreader. It's at least 10 people who had a huge part in making this book possible. And most acknowledgements in books fail to acknowledge anyone on the production team at all. I happen to know, like, most people at my company are like A-okay with that. We kind of like being the backstage hands that no one ever sees, but you know, it kind of just speaks to, like, they'll thank the cover designer, they'll definitely thank their agent, but it's really not a super informed process all of the time. With cover designs especially, there's often a lot of conflict between publishers and authors, at least at my press, and this could be because we're small, but honestly we have a kick-ass production team and always pump out good covers. We get authors who a lot of times think they know more about cover design than we. Often send us covers that are designed in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint and tell us, look, this should be my cover instead. And the truth is that production, marketing, and editorial at our company, we all come together, discuss covers, come up with designs, pick the best designer for that cover, and it's a whole process, and we've done it, you know, for years and years. And so when authors come back to us with this design they designed in 2 minutes and tell us it's better than what we came up with, it is kind of a slap in the face, to be honest. A good cover that is going to sell, which is always the point of covers, right? It takes a lot of work, and we don't just slap it together. We put a lot of work into making sure that every single book at our press gets the best cover design possible. Traditionally published authors, I would just say, do the best you can to be okay with your cover design on the first try. If there are things you can live with that aren't your favorite, live with them. Your publisher knows what they're doing. Obvious exceptions are if you want, say, a person of color on your cover and they don't listen to you. You know, I've heard that happening. Or like having a character with like a different hair color than your actual protagonist. Like, all of those things are legit, but coming back with your design preferences, it's often not actually that productive. Your publisher is a professional at making sure that they look good. So, and another thing to just think about if you're being traditionally published is not making changes at the last minute. So the time to make changes is at copy edits, or, you know, if you can do it at developmental edits with your editor first, that's great. But it's not at proofreading. If you try to rewrite your book at proofreading, and for context, this is after your book has been typeset. So you get these pretty pages, looks like a book, and then you try to rewrite it. That's a pain in the ass for production. They have the right to refuse you, but a lot of times production people will actually just try to work with you. But I'm telling you, you're being a pain in the ass, just so you know. It means that they have to make really quick changes before your book goes to the printer, and it increases the chance that an error is going to happen in your final book. Because it's really hard, you know, after a book has been proofread, to add in your changes that likely have mistakes in them and not introduce any new mistakes. Don't do it. Annoying writer trait number 4. So this is attacking reviewers. And this is the one that has the T, the one that's been on Twitter lately. I'm going to link to a really great podcast. I think it's called AuthorTube News, and I think it's Tamara Woods and Carol Brown have been doing it, and it's been really awesome. I've loved listening to it, but they did an episode about this recently. So the big scoop is that Sarah Dessen was hurt by something an alum at a college said about her books. I think it had to do with some reading program that brings authors to talk on campuses. She essentially used Sarah Dessen as a fill-in for books that she perceived to be not worthy of criticism because they're written for young women, right? A lot of people in the publishing community berated this reviewer, right? I mean, it was in a newspaper, so it does count as a review, just sort of something she probably said offhand. But she had to close down all of her social media accounts because, you know, Sarah Dessen has a huge platform. She had all these writers come to her defense and berate this reviewer for having an opinion, a bad opinion, but, you know, an opinion, and forced her off social media. This is a big problem. We need to let reviewers review their books. We need to let reviewers have bad opinions. We don't have to let reviewers be racist or sexist or anything like that, but we have to let them have opinions, and we have to acknowledge that reviews are for readers, they're not for writers. I don't think any reviewer writes these reviews thinking they're going to be read by the author. Maybe a select few do with bigger audiences, but they're not writing it for authors. They're writing it so that readers know if they'll like the book or not. There are obviously people who leave like not very thoughtful reviews. They'll read a 1-star because they don't like YA or whatever. And yeah, that's a problem, but at the end of the day, never ever single out a reviewer. It's bad, it's tacky. I know that your feelings are hurt or whatever, but talk to your writer friends about it and don't attack the reviewer ever. It's just wrong. It's a no-go, okay? So to recap, here are the 4 annoying writer traits that I have noticed. 1 is not caring about reader experience. 2 is expecting instant recognition for your writing. 3 is berating publishers and all of the people who've worked on your book. And 4 is attacking reviewers. Don't do it. A lot of these are complaints I have about traditionally published folks, right? And this is just because I happen to work at a publisher and I see how annoying authors can be. And people come to our office with their little printouts of their manuscript and they're like, can I talk to this editor? It's extremely rude. We also get people who call in to the office all the time and are like, well, what is this editor looking for? And it's like, bruh, we have a website. Just not being sensitive of publishers' time and also like blaming them for not publishing their books when really you just have to write a better book. T. This is really harsh. And this is coming from someone who's trying to get published and who hasn't been published yet. So know that I'm feeling the pain too, but it's just how it is. Be kind, don't be stalkery, don't be whiny, Just work on your book and make it the best you can. That's all we can do. Hope this wasn't too harsh. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little bell thing. See you guys next week. Bye!